We got more Overdress news, only they create more questions than actually answer. And we got more support for the Beast Deity archetype for Nova Grappler, and they do what they do best, and that's breaking the rules, as now they can attack with the Vanguard outside of the battle phase. Stand up! Vanguard! Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to another Cardfight update, and today we've got a lot of exciting news because we saw the new reveals for the Beast Deity archetype for the Clan Selection Plus Volume 2, but on top of that, we got some more information about the new things that will happen in Vanguard Overdress. So without further ado, let's jump straight into the meat and potatoes of this video and talk about all things new information. But before we dive into the card reveals, there's a small caveat, as there were also new promos revealed to us, but I'm not gonna address them in this video as they're part of a bigger picture, as we're gonna get another wave of revealed promos probably next week, and then once we see all of them, which are part of a special promo pack, then we're gonna discuss them, because there are some really interesting cards in their respective clans / archetypes, so look forward to that one once we tackle them in the future. But let's dive in the actual cards that we're gonna discuss today, which are the new Beast Deity cards, and we begin with this new grade 1, which is Beast Deity Lift Taurus, and its abilities are Auto and Rearguard Circle. When placed during your main phase, you may stand one of your units with Beast Deity in its card name. So this is really nice because this is basically yet another grade 1 which allows us to restand our units, as previously we only had Scarlet Bird that was a really good choice. So now we have 8 cards, 8 grade 1s, which all have on-place effects that allows us to restand something, which is really nice for the archetype, as this can synergize with Brutal Jack as it rests our unit, but it can also synergize with any of the grade 2 Beast Deities that can attack and rest itself during the main phase, and it also has some synergies with Azure Dragon, one of the key grade 3s of the archetype. So it's nice to have this for basically more consistency tools, and it's even better, as we're going to see with the brand new grade 3 Beast Deity FX Buster, as this card allows us to potentially stand our Vanguard as well. But then on top of that, this card also has the ability Auto Vanguard the Rearguard Circle. When your Vanguard attack hits, look at the 5 cards from the top of your deck, reveal up to 1 grade 3 card with Beast Deity in its card name from among them, and put them into your hand, and shuffle your deck. If you put a card into your hand and this unit is on the Rearguard Circle, put this unit into your soul. This is really nice because it allows us to search out for a grade 3, so that's really good right consistency, but the grade 3s are usually also really good beaters on the Rearguard Circle, like Luminal Dragon, so this is pretty nice in all ways that you can look at this. And it gives you hit pressure right at the get-go, which is nice, and the fact that it goes into the soul is also pretty good, because a lot of the Beast Deity engine will rely on soul, so generating more soul is pretty nice for just your overall engine. So Beast Deity Lift Taurus, a really great grade 1 for the archetype. Now if we go up to the grade 2, we've got Beast Deity Typhoon Bird, and her ability is act on Vanguard the Rearguard Circle once a turn. If you have a Vanguard with Beast Deity in its card name, cost count +1, look at the 5 cards from the top of your deck, call up to 1 card with Beast Deity in its card name other than grade 2 from among them to the Rearguard Circle as rest, and shuffle your deck. So this is basically a +1, only it's somewhat of a delayed +1 because you need to call it in rest. Now this isn't really an issue, because if we call a grade 1, we most likely are going to call the Lift Taurus or Scarlet Bird, which can basically restand themselves, so you effectively have a standing unit on the board. You could call a Luminal Dragon, which is nice because if you use this on grade 2, you have a grade 3 body early game, and a Luminal Dragon can be pretty beefy, so that's actually pretty good. And because you call a unit rest onto the field, that's yet another target that you can potentially stand with Scarlet Bird, because you want to stand at least 2 units, so you get the free draw off of the skill as well. So on first glance, this looks like a OK plus engine, but combined with all the pieces within the Beast Deity archetype, this is actually really good synergistic wise with what the archetype wants to do. So overall, pretty decent card. But then we get to the new boss unit to the archetype, and oh boy, this thing is really spicy in standard as well as premium, because we got Beast Deity FX Buster. And this new grade 3 has the abilities Auto and Vanguard Circle. When placed or rode upon, cost, discard 2 cards from your hand, stand 1 of your units with Beast Deity in its card name, and attack your opponent's Vanguard with that unit. At the end of the battle, if that unit attack did not hit, stand that unit. And if the attack did hit, that unit gets drive -1 until the end of turn. So this is very similar to what Azure Dragon did, as on right you could attack with the unit and if it didn't hit you can restand it, so you get a free attack off. Only in this case it doesn't cost you a counterblast, it does cost you discard. But this can also pick the Vanguard. If your Vanguard is a Beast Deity unit, and if you just write Epic Buster, it is 100% a Beast Deity unit, you can attack with the Vanguard. And as soon as you get the Twin Drive, the discard 2 cards, you get them immediately back on the Twin Drive. Now, if your opponent takes the damage, then that means you trade 1 card, because on the actual attack that you would have, what you normally would have Twin Drive, you only have a single drive. Which can be kind of annoying, but in the right circumstances, you don't really mind this at all. Now, the interesting part is that if you have Epic Buster and you write Epic Buster on top of Epic Buster, then you can activate this skill twice. So you could effectively attack with the Vanguard 3 times. Because even though you wouldn't hit with one of the attacks, you can then resolve the other effect to stand it and then attack with it. So your opponent is in for a pounding or a beating or whatever word you want to use in this one. So this could be really annoying for your opponent, especially in a late game scenario where they cannot take one of your Vanguard swings, and running crits with this would actually be a really solid option. And of course, anybody that plays premium is well aware of the fact that if you just write this thing or you write on top of this, you can just swing with your Vanguard, and if your opponent let the attack hit so they take a damage, it doesn't really matter that you lose the drive check, because if you then stride on top of that, the stride unit will just have triple drive like normal, because it hasn't the minus affected to the stride unit itself. And yes, the unit is then at rest, the stride unit, but we have Beast Deity, Liv Taurus, as well as Scarlet Bird that can then just restand the Vanguard and nothing really happened. And this is also where the new grade 1 comes into play, because if your opponent just let the attack hit, your Vanguard is rested, so how can you attack with the Vanguard? You just use the grade 1 to just immediately stand it, which is pretty nice. But on top of that, it also has a secondary skill, which is Auto Vanguard Circle. When your unit with Beast Deity in its card name attacks, cost counter +1, and that unit gets power +5k until the end of turn. Now, on the overall surface, this it's kind of mediocre, this skill, but in actuality, this is actually really useful, because Counterblast isn't really that straining on the Beast Deity archetype. Soul is probably more used, so you can use this maybe once or twice in a turn, especially if you want to go for a kill turn, and that 5k can actually help you quite beneficially in certain situations if a unit will reset multiple times. Or that your opponent gets defensive triggers and you want to hit over the defense trigger so your unit still hit. And in the case of Epic Buster himself, this is the same issue that we have with the Eradicator archetype with Descendant. They're 12k base. So even if you attack 3 times, if you do not hit a trigger, there's just 12k attacks. And if you're up against Force, this put no pressure on your opponent. Thanks to this skill, you can at least secure that all of your Epic Buster attacks will be 17k, because the power is until the end of turn. And if you have Counterblast to spare, you can just stack 5k on every time that Epic Buster attacks. So it becomes stronger and stronger and stronger, even if you do not get triggers, which is a lot better than Descendant himself. So Epic Buster is pretty damn interesting, and it opens up a lot of avenues for combo plays and potentials. You can combine this with Azure Dragon, for example, if you do not want to restand the Vanguard, because if you write Azure Dragon on top of this, you first can resolve Azure Dragon to draw a card and call a unit to the field if your opponent wiped your board, and then restand that unit multiple times if you do not want to potentially lose the drive checks on your Vanguard itself. Not sure if that's the correct play if you want to go that, but it's a route you can take. And then, of course, Luminal Dragon is a really strong grade 3 unit for our Beast Deities, as the Vanguard itself can get a massive power boost, and it also can potentially restand the rearguard if an attack did not hit, so that's also pretty nice. So overall, Beast Deity looks pretty damn interesting, because they basically have even more lines of plays, and they were an archetype within Nova Grappler, which has a lot of combo potential and all kinds of wacky ways that you can synergize or chain multiple skills together to have the best type of multi-attack strategies or patterns, and Epic Buster just builds on top of that, which is really, really cool to see. But of course, these cards weren't the only news that we've got, because we also got more Overdress announcements and information. And one thing of those information is an insight to the Dragon Empire trial deck, and this is what the trial deck is gonna contain. Now, I'm well aware that probably a lot of you guys have no clue what's now shown on screen. You cannot read hiragana, katakana, and kanji. That is probably very likely. But it is not important to know what this actually translates to, because the only thing what's important is the quantity of all the cards, as we see that most important cards are 4-offs, meaning one trial deck is more than enough. But also what we see here is that this trial deck will contain perfect guards. So this confirms perfect guards are returning to Overdress, which was pretty obvious, but there were people in the community that were speculating that maybe perfect guards wouldn't come back in standard. This basically debunks that. But another very interesting and odd thing here is that on the left side, we see the original starter, which is the Dragon Egg we've seen so far in the trailer and whatnot. But on the right side, we see yet another Grade Zero, but not just one Grade Zero. We see 4 copies of this. And the name is Trickstar, which is the starter unit that looks like Chrono Dren, but then for the Dragon Empire thing that we saw in the trailer as well. So I'm kind of curious why that Grade Zero is included at 4 copies. So this basically tells us that we have a Grade Zero which does something for the main theme of this trial deck, otherwise they wouldn't incorporate 4 copies of this card. But we also see that the trial deck, and this will probably be the same for every trial deck of every nation, is that it will contain 1 of the overtriggers, 4 criticals, 4 draws, 3 fronts, which probably will tell us that fronts is going to be universal this time around, and then 4 heals. But then the last line is really interesting, because those are 3 copies of a Grade 2 order card. And that tells us that order cards are returning to the new standard in Overdress as well, which is pretty exciting, because I had a lot of video ideas ready to record it and made concerning order cards about all kinds of things. But I had to put them on the back burner because I didn't know if order cards will be continued in the new era, as it wouldn't make any sense to talk about them if they were just discontinued and we had only the 10 or 12 order cards we have right now. So that is actually really exciting for me personally, because it means I have more content to make. But overall, I don't want to go into too much detail about this, because I'm probably going to do a separate video by analyzing what we have here, what this would probably mean for all the other trial decks, and what we could expect going forward, as there is a lot to analyze just from this picture alone. So I'm going to leave it at that. Now, as for the other new information that we got from the Overdress announcement, is this confirmation and the explanation of what the new Persona Right mechanic is going to look like and how it's going to work. So this picture shows us basically what it is, and the mechanic, how it works, is pretty logical, because how it works is that you have a Vanguard with the Persona icon on the left corner, top left corner, and then if you write from hand another copy with the same name of the unit with the icon, it specifically needs to be the same unit, then the Persona Right mechanic will activate. And what it basically does is you draw 1 extra card, so you draw a card, and then your entire front row passively will gain 10k power. So that effectively means that all your units that are going to attack will get an extra passive 10k power. Even if there aren't any units on the circles themselves when you Persona Right that turn, you still can get the power onto new units called to those particular circles, because the power is continuous. So if you can call units to the field, they will get the power, or if you can potentially multi-attack by switching units or something like that, then they can also get the power buff itself. So if we get something like switching columns that we have seen in Aqua Force, then those units will benefit from this passive 10k power as well. Now, there is once again a lot to analyze here and to talk about this particular mechanic, but I don't want to make this video longer than it should be. This is basically the bare basics of what you should know that this mechanic, how it works. I'm going to make a separate video tomorrow talking about this mechanic, my personal opinions and what I think about this in greater detail, because there is a lot to analyze here and I have some things to say about how I feel about this and how they could potentially go forward with this particular mechanic itself. Now, the only thing that I want to end this video off is that they did a small Q&A to clarify maybe certain misunderstandings about this mechanic, and the questions that they answered are the following. The question: during the turn when I wrote a grade 3 unit on a grade 2 unit, can I continue to use Persona Right? No, you cannot. You can only write once a turn. You're able to use Persona Right the next turn. So that's pretty logical, because grade 2s don't have the Persona Right marker, and if you write a grade 3 on top of it, firstly, it doesn't have the same name, so you can never activate the Persona Right in the first place. So this makes sense. And you cannot write multiple times in the right phase, which we all know since day one. Then the second question is, After using Persona Right, I called a rearguard to the front row. Does this rearguard get power plus 10k? Yes, it does. As I explained, the power is continuously, so even if you call new units or switch units or do something with multi-tech shenanigans, all the units in the front row will get the 10k passively for the entirety of the turn, which is nice. And then the final question, on the turn after I wrote a grade 3 unit directly from hand, can I write a grade 3 from my right deck and perform a Persona Right? No, you cannot. You can only write one grade above your current Vanguard when writing from the right deck. Therefore, you are unable to use Persona Right. Now, this is pretty interesting because I don't think they clarified this beforehand in the last week's live stream about the right deck, but apparently you can only write grades up with the right deck itself. So if you're grade 2, you cannot write the grade 2 from the right deck, even if you've written from hand previously and think maybe I want to stall a turn for something like a mechanic, I don't know why, but let's say you want to stall a turn, you cannot do that with the right deck itself. So you can only write up in the grade via the right deck itself, which is interesting. And this is all the information that we have concerning the Persona Right mechanic. Now, one more thing that they thrown out there concerning the right deck itself is that they confirmed that G-assisting wouldn't be a thing in this standard format. This makes sense because why would you ever want to G-assist if you have the right deck? Maybe somebody in the comments will probably say, well, actually in this particular instance, you rather want to G-assist, but I cannot come up with the situation where that actually will matter. So it makes sense that G-Assist wouldn't be a thing anymore. So the new Overdress standard will have the right deck, and V-Series and Premium will have G-Assisting moving forward, which is fine. Like, it works. I'm completely fine with this change. It will probably even confuse more players if they could G-Assist as well as right deck, because it doesn't really make any sense. So I'm fine that they clarified this, as they had that question last week and they couldn't really answer it, and they went with the notion that you could probably G-Assist, but they said, why would you? And that makes sense. So this is basically to clarify and to prevent confusion. With that said, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below about all the new news that we got for Overdress, as we still got a lot to talk about as they keep on churning with all the more reveals for Overdress, and of course the Clan Selection Plus set as well. So let me know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. As always, I want to give a huge shout out to my Patreon supporters over patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply go to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a Patreon today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Timeleaf, and I see you guys in the next one!